Please welcome back Mr. Ty West. Now, some of you have seen me do this already, so I'm going to throw it straight over to you so we can... any questions for Ty?
I couldn't wait.
Hello. Really good cool film.
Thanks.
And just in your opinion, obviously it's all shot in stark daylight, apart from the middle part,
Uh-huh.
ever so slightly in the dark. In your opinion, is that scarier to shoot in daylight? We saw Proxy earlier on, and a lot of that was shot in daylight as well.
Shot in daylight, did you hear that? Is it scary
Is
to
it
be
scary?
shot in daylight?
I don't know. I think it's case by case specific. I think that this movie, there's been some debate on whether it's a horror movie or not because it doesn't have anything supernatural in it. To me, as a horror movie, it's certainly very horrific. But I think that it doesn't make a big difference to me. I think nighttime is moodier, and it's you hide things in the shadows more, and it's more familiar to sort of this scary movie kind of thing. But I don't know. I think it just depends on the content. And what this movie was sort of it wasn't really about this sort of secret thing. It was this atrocity that was happening in front of them. So I don't know. I think it's just case by case specific.
Right, then I'm going to go. I will get to you, but I'm going to go right to the back. The guy with the hat.
Hi there, Ty.
Hello.
I don't know how to play, but did you ever consider not having a score?
Yes, we did consider not having a score, but it's weird semantics. But I don't entirely think of the movie as found footage. It's easy to call it that because then everyone knows when they come in here they're seeing a movie that involves a camera as a character, for lack of a better term. But the movie was about people from Vice who that their job is they make these type documentaries. So I always thought of it as a horror Christopher Guest movie, a movie that was it was made after the fact. So to me, it wasn't about we discovered this tape and this is just what was on it put together like this. It's somebody edited this movie like a movie, and so therefore it was planned early on to have a score.
I'm going to go to the guy there. Yeah.
Oh, what's up?
Yeah.
Just a very silly question, but I was just wondering, the little girl that was swirling her cup around, did you ask her to do that, or was that just a natural thing that she did?
That was a natural thing that she did. The extras were really great in that. Most of the stuff the extras did, they made my life really easy by being really fantastic extras. And so we just tried to find, anytime someone was doing something interesting like that, to make sure we got it.
Right, I'll come to you then.
It's obviously based on the Jonestown massacre. So I was just wondering, was there a real decision behind setting it in modern day times with modern technology as opposed to setting it in a time when it really happened?
Yeah.
Did you hear that, guys?
Yes, it's based on Jonestown. Basically, why not make it Jonestown? Because I think that to tell the actual Jonestown story, you can't do it in an hour and a half. You can't do it in 2 hours. I think that when you're dealing with the real people and the real names and the real event, you have to start in Indiana when he's a kid and start from where he came from and how he moved to Ukiah and San Francisco and ultimately down to Guyana and Jonestown, and then you have to do the aftermath. If you don't do all of that and you're dealing with real people and a real thing, it does a disservice and it's sort of unfair to that story and unfair to the people that are involved. So I used the last 48 hours of Jonestown, not just People's Temple in general, but that as a sort of framework for the movie. And the reason I did that and I did it today is because I think a lot of the reasons people joined People's Temple in the 60s and 70s is just as relevant as it is today. And I think that a lot of times cults in movies are seen as these people in robes and these crazy religious to scary bad guys. And I think what was so scary to me about what happened in Jonestown is that these weren't crazy religious people necessarily. They were people who were just looking for an alternative life than to what they had in the United States. And in trying to do something else, they were misled into something that ultimately became a mass murder more than a mass suicide. And so I always found that very terrifying. And I also feel since a lot of those things that brought people to join it then are still relevant today, and history tends to repeat itself, that sort of updating it and using the sort of framework based on something real in the same way that I use a real brand, so that hopefully when you come out of here seeing this movie, hopefully you still think about it a little bit. And when you think about it, it's related to something real. It's related to a brand. If you see Vice somewhere, you're oh, right, and it kind of takes you back and it takes you back to what the movie's about, which is sort of more than just sort of, I always say there's what happens in the movie and then there's what the movie's about. And I think that, those were sort of goals to kind of make it this, a movie that's very steeped in realism and a movie that hopefully was provocative enough to make you think about it.
Yes, gentlemen.
So yeah, really following up on what you've been saying there, for me, I love the film, but the whole success depended on performances.
Yeah.
Which were Fowler's performance during the interviews stunning.
Yeah.
Was that something that concerned you going into the movie, knowing that the success really was going to depend on this? very realistic performance across the whole cast?
Yeah, I mean, I think the performances, and specifically Father in general, what you're asking was, yeah, it was very stressful because the whole movie kind of rides on that being great. And more specifically, the interview scene, which is sort of like the middle, the anchor of the movie, and arguably like the best scene in the movie. When we shot that scene was 12 pages long, and usually like doing 12 pages in a day is like not a good idea. But we were doing 12 pages a day at night with 200 extras. And that's a very stressful situation for production to be in because if anything goes wrong, it's just the wheels fall off and you're doomed. And I had just met Gene, and it was great because that was our first night shooting, and we were like, all right, this is a beast of a scene to deal with. Here's what we're going to do. Get all the extras in there. You're going to come out. They're going to cheer. You're going to come in. You're going to sit down, and we're just going to go. And let's not tell the extras anything. Let's just see what happens, and I'll just shoot it. And then whenever you lose a line, we'll just see where the wheels fall off, and we'll stop, and then we'll do it in chunks, and we'll get through this. Well, the first take we did, in comes Gene. Everybody goes apeshit and cheers. He comes and sits down and does a 17-minute take without dropping a line, and everything the extras did, they just did. And what you have to realize is that the extras haven't read the script. They don't know what the movie's about. They're just there for one night to hang out on a movie set and like be extras in a movie. So all are there like, yes, fathers, and and all this stuff. They just did that naturally, which for me as a director was great because I was like, they could be terrible. I might have to go micromanage and be like, these people, we got to get them out of here. Everyone just sort of came to life and did all that based on his performance, and then he played off them, and he did 17 minutes without dropping a line, got up, made cheer, and he walked out. And we finished early that night. And what was amazing about it was that, like, one, I think AJ looked over his shoulder and was like, we're going to be okay. And two, it was such an electric feeling in the air to have him do that well and have those reactions be genuine. Because what's amazing about those reactions is it was great for me as a director, but it's also sort of terrifying because, like, that's how it happens. Like, they were just like, everything he's saying makes sense. And that was their natural reaction. They didn't know what the movie's about. So when he's saying, this is what we should do, they're like, that was just them actually thinking that. So it was kind of a weird vibe in the air to have it work out that way. But it was one of the better days on the movie for sure.
Guy at the back.
I really like how the setting was shooting, so I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the location, any stories, if it was quite aggressive, or if it was a nice place to sort of shoot, or...
Well, he was asking about the set, and, not to sort of totally movie magic the situation, but it's just someone's backyard in Savannah, Georgia, and we built everything. So it's a hayfield right now. There's nothing there. So, we found a guy's backyard that let us shoot there, and we built everything. So everything was micromanaged exactly how we wanted it to be, and I mean, we would have liked to build a little more, but we built as much as we could, and it was one of the first times I've ever been able to just like build the whole thing and be like, this is where I want everything so we can stage everything like this. It was a real shame that when the movie was over, like all that stuff just got torn down and it's just scrap lumber. And it's a very weird feeling.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just wondering, like using a real company like Vice, did they have any input in the scripts, or did they just let you use their brands?
No, they didn't have any input in the script. I mean, it was basically like I wanted to work for a real company. I asked them. It wasn't about them. Like it was not about Vice. Just like if it was NBC, it would start with like a peacock and go boom, 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 and then it would whatever. But in this case, it's Vice because I think that Vice is sort of like on the forefront of video journalism and going to sort of off the grid kind of places and telling unusual stories and using sort of new media to its fullest. So I feel like they're the kind of people that a story like this would be reported from nowadays. But since it wasn't really about them, it wasn't a creative issue necessarily.
You're obviously known like the really classic old school type horror, and this felt very different, like old community films that watch something like Bloomfield maybe or something. But just wondering what you think, what's different about generating like scares and tension using this approach to filmmaking and what it means to say?
I think each movie is sort of different, and I think for me, like not necessarily wanting to repeat myself. That's a big part of sort of making something different. I mean, the thing I'm doing next is totally different than any of it, but also I think with a movie like this, you're stuck a little bit in this sort of framework. It helped to have the characters be like professionals at making documentaries, so that helped me be able to be a little more cinematic than normally could be. It didn't have to be like some guy with his iPhone that he drops all the time. It was like they were able to actually frame shots, and that was sort of nice. But this movie to me, I wanted to make a horror movie that didn't have any supernatural elements, and that was my real goal with this movie. And to make something that was like confronting, and all the violence in the movie would be like not fun, would be sort of confronting and like hopefully upsetting. And that was really the approach to this movie. It doesn't have as many of those. It has tension, it has suspense, and it's like what's going to happen, but it doesn't have those like scares and things popping out. And that was just never the plan from the get-go.
Yeah.
You write, direct, and edit all your films now. Do you you feel at home with all of those areas, or do you have a particularly favourite process?
They're all very traumatic. I think that to me, writing, directing, editing is just filmmaking. I think some people can compartmentalize them. I came up doing them myself, so it's very hard for me to compartmentalize them. It's hard for me not to write a movie that I make because if someone has a question about, like, why does he say this line? It's like, oh, I didn't write it. If I wrote it, I'd be like, here's why. And here, no, don't say it, or whatever. And then directing is just an extension of getting that story into a cinematic form, and then editing is just like basically finishing your directing. It's like, well, I shot it so that I don't shoot a lot of coverage. It's like I shot this to go like this and to go like that. It doesn't always work that way, and sometimes you get a little creative. This movie was harder than normal because we had a lot more footage, and I usually shoot films on film and in a very traditional sense, and this was this kind of new media fake documentary thing. So it was a little harder to edit. I realized after editing this movie why people take years to edit documentaries. It's hard to just sift through all the footage. But I think that maybe none of them are easier than the other one. They all seem easier in retrospect. Like when you're done writing it, it seems like, hey, it was a breeze writing it, and then directing's terrible. Then when you're done directing, you're editing and you're miserable, and you're like, I wish I was just back there shooting it. That was so much easier. And so it never really ends. But to me, they're all just what you come up with to put on a page for a scene, and the way you stage it and the way you cut it together is all just an extension of the same thought.
Right in the back.
Hi. I love the film.
Thank you.
Did you have anybody else in mind to play the father, or was it Gene from the get-go?
It was Gene from the get-go, but the get-go began because I didn't know who I was going to cast for that part, and I was watching an episode of Louis C.K. show. I don't know if you guys have that over here. And Gene played a pharmacist in one of the episodes of his show, and there was a woman waiting in line, and Louis was behind her, and she was taking forever asking all these sort of name questions. And Gene turns to her and is like, have you had a bowel movement today? Was it soft? And she gets really embarrassed and leaves, and I was like, that's the guy. And so we tracked him down, and he did an audition, he put himself on tape, and it was like, that's it. And then basically the first night of shooting was like I answered the question before, it was like that interview scene, and he just came out and did that, and we were like, it was great.
Yes, go ahead.
Obviously, Eli Roth produced this. He's also worked on The Last Exorcism, which is a superficially similar film. What did Eli bring to the film, and what kind of lessons do you think that he brought from The Last Exorcism?
I don't know what lessons he brought from The Last Exorcism. He brought the money to this film, which is there would be no film without it, which is fantastic. I mean, I came to Eli with the idea of the movie. He loved it, so I can get that movie financed, and sure enough, he could. And he got it financed based on sort of my pitch. And then I wrote a script, and off we went with it. And what was great about Eli is that, being that he's a filmmaker himself, his sort of mentality of a producer is exactly what you would want as a director, in that he's like, well, what do you need to make this movie? Okay, I'll get you the money, and then I'll get he had Final Cut, so he just got everyone to leave me alone, and he basically gave me Final Cut. So it was basically, he just cleared the road for me to go make my movie. And he wasn't interested in making a movie through me. He wanted me to make my movie, and he was very protective of that. And that's what you want as a filmmaker. That's the ideal producer, is someone who can get the money and will leave you alone unless you need help, and then they're there to help you. And I think Eli always really respected me with that, and it was great to have him be like that. And I think we ended up with a movie that we're both proud of, that's different than people would expect from either of us.
A couple more. Yes. Yeah.
Given the acknowledged similarities and influence of the last 48 hours of Jamestown, was there any reason you didn't acknowledge that in the credits?
I just feel like the whole movie is I'm not hiding the Jonestown fact, even the synopsis of the movie. So no, not really, but because I just felt like it seems very apparent that Jonestown is the sort of archetype for it all.
Yes.
Hi. You said that it was obviously advantageous to have the characters be professional filmmakers. Obviously, James Swanberg and Christopher Orley are professional directors as well. I was wondering whether you always intended those parts to be played by people who knew how to direct themselves as well, or whether you just wanted them as actors.
Yeah, a little bit of both. I knew most of the cast of this movie personally, and have either been friends with them or worked with them before. And what was great is I was able to write this movie specifically for them. And it's rare that you get to do that and then definitely get those people. So I was able to write the movie for Joe. I was able to write the movie for AJ. I was writing the movie for Tucker and Amy and so forth. So I was able to write to their voices, so that way, A, them playing these parts would be very natural to them, and then B, if they wanted to improv off of that, it would be an obvious extension, and they would just elevate it by being themselves. As far as Joe is concerned, it was really great that he's a director, because I'd say I shot 80% of the movie, but the other 20% that he shot, it was so easy to explain to him what I wanted him to shoot, and he would just be like, I got it. And he would, most of the time, if there was a scene where I couldn't be there, like him running around in the woods and falling down, and then them coming, I'd be like, you're gonna run out here, go through here, maybe cut it, jump over this thing, and then set it down, and then you gotta go hide behind a tree so they can pick it up, turn around. He'd be like, and then he would just nail it, because it was not like you're explaining that to someone who didn't have a history of using cameras for a long time. So any of those scenes that he was operating the camera for made that so much easier. And not only just because he understood technically how to do it, his taste and my taste are similar enough that aesthetically, like what he would follow in the frame and what he would focus on was almost always the same kind of things that I would. So, it was strategic that character be played by someone that I knew if I had to give him that extra job, he could. And unlike the Jones, I think he is in the credits as like additional footage, because he did.
Right.
So,
Right, a couple more because we've got to move on. Oh, yeah.
Would you like to go on to mention that? What to mention now?
No. Well, a lot of this movie stemmed from wanting to make a horror movie that didn't have any supernatural elements, but it also stemmed from I wanted to make a documentary, but everything to make a documentary about. And so in making a documentary style movie, I was able to kind of sort of create something to do that. But I want to get back to doing something very cinematic. So I'm going to do a Western next, which is very sort of like traditional type filmmaking and like sort of purist cinema. And so after coming off something like this, I definitely want to sort of get back to doing like very traditional type stuff. Unless if a subject matter popped up that I want to get of it, it's great. I think that the best documentaries are essentially better than what most movies can be because it's so like incredible to have the insight into something that amazing. But I think I don't want to make a documentary about something that's just because.
Last question, anybody? Yes, young lady there.
Are there any other real life events that you'd like to reinterpret on film?
Not particularly because, it depends. If it was to do like a mini-series or something like that, that'd be one thing. I still think someone should make like an 8-part mini-series about Jonestown. I think it's an incredibly fascinating story. It's an important part of American history. It's a very tragic mass murder that's been reduced to pop culture. It's been reduced to drink the Kool-Aid. And that's like an incredibly sort of insensitive thing considering what happened, and that I don't think people really understand. Like I was saying to someone the other night, if you suddenly heard that 900 Scottish people committed suicide in, Ireland, you'd be like, what? It would just be, it's such an incredible thing to have happen that now that it's just the drink the Kool-Aid thing is sort of very bizarre. So I think that story still should be told. I think that there are good documentaries about it, but I think that there's room for a narrative story. I was going to say fiction, that's not true, but a mini-series about it that hopefully gives you to some degree what this movie did was give you an idea of the kind of people and how they ended up there and how they were manipulated and how they weren't just crazy like horror movie people, and how that is not the case. But I think in order to do that, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that and a lot of pressure that comes with that, and I think that it requires long form to do it properly because it's the only way to sort of, report something like that and to do it accurately. So it'd be, someone should do a thing about Jonestown. As far as me doing another, I don't know. It was a grim year making this movie. It's kind of a downer. So it was a lot to sit with. But who knows?
Time. Thanks for bringing it over. And Mr. Tyway.